Hi everyone, my name is Sarah, and I need to tell you about the most shocking Christmas dinner of my life. What happened that night changed everything, and I promise you won't believe how it ended. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever had people in your life who smiled to your face but were planning to destroy you behind your back? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. The smell of roasted turkey filled our dining room as everyone sat around the table. My mother-in-law Linda was complaining about the cranberry sauce, my sister Emma was trying to change the subject, and Mark's three best friends, Jake, Tommy, and Dave, kept looking at each other with these weird smiles. I should have known something was wrong. Jake kept checking his watch like he was waiting for a show to start. Tommy couldn't stop grinning, and Dave was fidgeting with his napkin. But I was too busy making sure everyone had enough food to really notice. "Sarah, this turkey is amazing," Jake said, but his voice sounded fake. "You really outdid yourself this year." "Thank you," I replied, passing him the mashed potatoes. "I'm just happy we could all be together for Christmas." That's when I saw it, the look that passed between the three men. It was like they were sharing a secret joke, and I was the punchline. Mark suddenly stood up from his chair. His face was red, and his hands were shaking. "Actually, everyone, I have something important to say." The room went quiet. Even Linda stopped chewing her food. "Sarah," Mark said, his voice cracking, "I think it's time we talked about our future." My heart started beating faster. Something was very wrong. Mark reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. My sister Emma gasped when she saw it. "These are divorce papers," Mark announced, throwing the envelope down in front of me. "I want a divorce, Sarah. I'm done with this marriage." The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Linda's fork clattered onto her plate. Emma's mouth fell open. But Jake, Tommy, and Dave? They were watching me like hawks, waiting for something. I looked down at the papers, then back at Mark. "You're serving me divorce papers at Christmas dinner? In front of everyone?" "That's right," Mark said, trying to sound confident. I figured it was time to be honest. Jake leaned forward in his chair, his eyes gleaming. Tommy was practically bouncing with excitement. Dave was trying to hide his smile behind his wine glass. They were enjoying this. They wanted to see me break down and cry. But here's the thing about me that they didn't know. I don't break that easily. Instead of crying, I smiled. "Well, Mark, since we're giving out surprises tonight, I have some gifts too." I reached under the table where I had hidden 3 beautifully wrapped presents. Red ribbon, gold bows, the works. I had spent hours making them look perfect. "Jake, Tommy, Dave," I said sweetly, "I got you each something special for Christmas." The 3 men looked confused. This wasn't what they expected. They thought I'd be sobbing by now, begging Mark not to leave me. Sarah," Jake said slowly, "you really didn't have to get us anything." "Oh, but I did," I replied, handing each of them their gift. "Trust me, you're going to love what's inside." Tommy shook his box. "What is it?" "Open them and see," I said, sitting back down in my chair. The 3 men started tearing off the wrapping paper. Jake opened his first, and I watched as his face went from curious to confused to absolutely terrified. The color drained from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. Tommy opened his next, and his hand started shaking so badly he almost dropped the box. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Dave was the last to open his gift, and when he saw what was inside, he actually made a choking sound. His eyes went wide with pure panic. All 3 men sat there staring at their gifts, looking like they had seen ghosts. What do you think was in those boxes that made 3 grown men look so terrified? Drop your guesses in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you want to know what happens next. Trust me, you won't believe how this story unfolds. Let me take you back to where this whole mess started. 6 months before that Christmas dinner, my life looked perfect from the outside. I had a beautiful house, a successful husband, and what everyone thought was the ideal marriage. But you know what they say, things aren't always what they seem. It was a warm June evening when I first noticed something was off. Mark had just gotten home from work, and I was in the kitchen making his favorite dinner, grilled chicken with garlic mashed potatoes. I always tried to have dinner ready when he got home because that's what good wives do, right? "Honey, I'm home," Mark called out, but his voice sounded different, distant. "Perfect timing," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "Dinner's almost ready. How was your day?" Mark loosened his tie and sat down at the kitchen counter. "Long, really long. Jake wants to grab drinks after work tomorrow, so I'll be home late." This was the third time that week Jake had wanted to hang out. "Again? You guys just went out on Tuesday." "Sarah, he's my best friend. We work hard and sometimes we need to blow off steam." Mark's tone was sharper than usual. I didn't want to start a fight, so I just nodded and served dinner. But something felt wrong. Mark barely touched his food and kept checking his phone every few minutes. "Who keeps texting you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just work stuff," he said quickly, putting his phone face down on the table. That night, Mark fell asleep before I even got out of the shower. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when my husband had become a stranger. The next few weeks were more of the same. Mark worked late almost every night. When he was home, he seemed distracted and irritable. Our conversations became shorter and shorter until we were barely talking at all. But the worst part was his friends. Jake, Tommy, and Dave had always been part of our lives. They came over for barbecues, watched football games in our living room, and joined us for dinner parties. I had always tried to be the perfect hostess, making sure they had cold beers and hot food. But lately, something had changed in the way they looked at me. It started with little things. When I would walk into a room where they were talking, they would suddenly stop and change the subject. Jake would give me these fake smiles that never reached his eyes. Tommy would make comments about my cooking or my clothes that sounded like compliments but felt like insults. "Sarah, you're such a good little housewife," Tommy said one evening when they were all watching a game. "Mark's so lucky to have someone who takes care of everything for him." The way he said, "little housewife," made my skin crawl, but Mark just laughed along with his friends. Dave was quieter, but I caught him staring at me sometimes with this weird expression, like he was studying me or waiting for something to happen. The worst was Jake. He had this way of making me feel stupid without actually saying anything mean. He would ask me questions about current events, then act surprised when I knew the answers. Or he would make jokes that everyone else laughed at, but I didn't understand. "Sarah doesn't get it," he would say with that fake smile. "She's too pure for our twisted sense of humor." Mark never defended me. He just laughed along with them like I wasn't even there. One night in July, I was cleaning up after another dinner party when I overheard them talking on the back patio. I was washing dishes by the kitchen window, and their voices carried through the screen. "Dude, you need to be more careful," Jake was saying. "Sarah's not stupid." "She doesn't suspect anything," Mark replied. "She trusts me completely." "That's what makes this so easy," Tommy added. "She has no idea what's coming." My hands froze in the soapy water. What was coming? What didn't I know? "Just remember what we talked about," Dave said quietly. "Stick to the plan." I know, Mark sounded annoyed. "Everything's under control." They came back inside before I could hear more, but those words echoed in my head for days. What plan? What was I supposed to suspect? I started paying closer attention to everything. Mark's late nights, his secretive phone calls, the way his friends looked at me. I noticed that Mark had been dressing nicer for work, wearing cologne more often, and taking extra care with his appearance. One evening in August, Mark's phone rang while he was in the shower. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. The name Jessica flashed across it with a heart emoji. My blood ran cold. Who was Jessica? Mark had never mentioned anyone by that name. When Mark came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on the bed pretending to read a magazine. "Your phone rang," I said casually. "Someone named Jessica." Mark's face went white for just a second before he recovered. "Oh, that's just someone from the marketing department, probably about the Johnson account." But I saw the panic in his eyes, and I knew he was lying. That night, I lay awake thinking about everything. The late nights, the secretive behavior, his friends' weird comments, and now this Jessica person. Pieces of a puzzle were starting to come together. but I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. Have you ever had that moment when you realize your whole life might be a lie? When the person you trust most in the world might be betraying you? Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt that sinking feeling in your stomach when you know something's wrong, but you're afraid to find out what it is. You know that feeling when your worst fears turn out to be true? When you discover that the person you love most has been lying to your face every single day? Well, that's exactly what happened to me on a rainy Tuesday morning in September. And what I found was so much worse than just an affair. Mark had left for work early that morning, claiming he had an important client meeting. But he forgot his phone on the nightstand, something that never happened because Mark was glued to that thing 24/7. I stared at the phone for almost an hour, my coffee getting cold as I debated what to do. Part of me wanted to respect his privacy, but the other part, the part that had been noticing all the lies and strange behavior, knew I had to look. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. Mark had never changed his passcode from our wedding anniversary, which now seemed almost cruel. The phone unlocked, and I went straight to his text messages. The first thing I saw made my heart stop. Message after message from Jessica with photos that no coworker should ever send. But that wasn't even the worst part. I scrolled up to see older messages, and that's when I found the group chat. Mark, Jake, Tommy, and Dave had a private chat called the Boys Club, and what I read there made me physically sick. Jake. How's Operation Break Sarah going? She suspect anything yet? Mark. Nah, she's clueless. Still making me dinner every night like nothing's wrong. Tommy. Dude, I can't believe she hasn't figured it out. My wife would have caught me months ago. Dave. That's because your wife isn't as trusting as Sarah. She actually believes Mark works late every night. Mark. Jessica thinks it's hilarious that my wife has no idea. She wants to meet her sometime. Jake. Don't get cocky. We need to stick to the plan. Christmas dinner is still the target date. Tommy. I still think we should bet on how long she'll cry. I'm saying at least 10 minutes. Dave. My money's on her running out of the room. She won't be able to handle the public humiliation. Jake. Either way, it's going to be epic. Mark serves the papers, she breaks down, and we all get front row seats to the show. I dropped the phone like it was on fire. My whole body was shaking, and I felt like I was going to throw up. They weren't just cheating and lying. They were planning to humiliate me in front of my family. They had turned my marriage into some sick game for their entertainment. But I kept reading, and it got worse. Mark. Jake, you sure about the money thing? I don't want to get caught. Jake. Trust me, I've done this before. Move it to the offshore account I set up. She'll never find it. Tommy. Smart. My divorce cost me everything because I didn't plan ahead. Dave. What about the house? Mark. Already talked to a lawyer. Since it's in both our names, I can force a sale. She'll get half, but that's better than her getting everything. Jake. Don't forget about the credit cards. Max them out on stuff you can return later. Stick her with the debt. They weren't just planning to divorce me. They were planning to destroy me financially. Jake was helping Mark hide money, and they were all giving advice on how to leave me with nothing. I screenshot everything before Mark's phone started ringing. I quickly put it back on the nightstand and pretended to be getting dressed when Mark came rushing back. Forgot my phone, he said, grabbing it quickly. Can't function without this thing. I know the feeling, I said, forcing a smile. Have a good day at work, honey. Love you too, he said, kissing my cheek like he hadn't just been planning my destruction. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I ran to my laptop and started researching. I needed a lawyer, a private investigator, and a plan of my own. But first, I had to know more about Jake, Tommy, and Dave. If they wanted to play games with my life, I was going to find out everything about theirs. I started with social media, looking through their posts and photos. Then I dug deeper, searching public records and news articles. What I found was fascinating. Jake worked as an accountant for a construction company. Tommy was a sales manager at a car dealership. Dave worked for the city in some kind of administrative role. All of them seemed like normal, boring guys. But I had a feeling there was more to their stories. And I was going to find out what they were hiding. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was planning to betray you? How did you handle it? And what do you think Sarah should do next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe because this story is about to get really interesting. Over the next 3 months, I became someone I never thought I could be, a detective in my own home. Every day I smiled at Mark over breakfast while secretly planning my counterattack. And what I discovered about his precious friends was going to change everything. The private investigator I hired was a woman named Carol, and she was worth every penny. Within 2 weeks, she had given me a file that made my jaw drop. "Your husband's friends aren't as clean as they pretend to be," Carol said during our secret meeting at a coffee shop across town. "Jake Morrison has been embezzling money from his company for over a year." She showed me bank statements and financial records that proved Jake had been stealing small amounts from client accounts, thinking no one would notice. He had taken almost $50,000 and used it to pay for expensive vacations and a new car. "How did you find this out?" I asked, amazed. "I have contacts everywhere," Carol smiled. "Jake got sloppy. He's been using company credit cards for personal expenses and falsifying expense reports. His boss just hasn't figured it out yet." But that was just the beginning. Tommy's story was even more disgusting. Carol had followed him for a week and discovered he wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was cheating with multiple women, including his wife's younger sister, Rebecca. "I have photos and videos," Carol said, sliding another folder across the table. "Tommy meets Rebecca at a motel every Thursday afternoon. He tells his wife he's at sales meetings." The photos made me sick. Tommy and Rebecca in the motel parking lot, kissing in his car, going into room 237 together. His wife, Sarah, yes, we had the same name, had no idea her husband and sister were betraying her. "There's more," Carol continued. "Tommy's been stealing cars from his dealership lot. He takes them for weekends, puts fake temporary tags on them, then returns them Monday morning. He's been doing it for months." Dave's secrets were different but just as damaging. Carol had discovered that he had been lying about his military service for years. "Dave Williams never served overseas," she explained. "He was in the National Guard for 2 years but never deployed anywhere. Yet he's been collecting veterans' benefits and using his fake military record to get promotions at work." "How is that possible?" I asked. "He forged documents, fake deployment papers, fake medals, fake medical records claiming PTSD from combat he never saw. The VA has been paying him disability benefits for 3 years. I stared at the evidence in front of me. Jake was a thief, Tommy was a cheater and a car thief, and Dave was a fraud. These were the men my husband trusted, the ones giving him advice on how to destroy my life. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to know more about Mark's affair and their financial plans. Carol had been following Mark too, and what she found was almost funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Mark thought he was being so clever, but he was actually terrible at hiding his affair. "Your husband meets Jessica Martinez every Tuesday and Friday at the Marriott downtown," Carol reported. "He pays cash for the room and thinks he's being sneaky, but he uses the same credit card for dinner afterward every time." She showed me receipts, photos, and even audio recordings of Mark bragging to Jessica about how stupid I was. "He told her you do all the housework and cooking while he's out having fun," Carol said. "Jessica thinks it's hilarious that you have no idea what's happening." The worst part was learning about their financial scheme. Carol had traced the offshore account Jake had set up for Mark. They had already moved $15,000 from our joint savings account. "They're planning to move more money right before Christmas," Carol explained. "Jake's been teaching Mark how to hide assets and create fake debts to reduce what you'd get in a divorce." I also discovered that Mark had been applying for credit cards in both our names, planning to max them out and leave me with the debt. He had already opened 3 cards I didn't know about. But here's what Mark and his friends didn't know. I had been busy too. I had secretly opened my own bank account and started moving money there. I had copies of all our financial records, and I had been recording Mark's phone calls when he thought I wasn't home. Every conversation with Jake about hiding money, every call with his lawyer about divorce strategy, every disgusting comment about me, I had it all on tape. By December, I had enough evidence to destroy all 4 of them. Jake would go to prison for embezzlement. Tommy would lose his wife, his job, and face charges for car theft. Dave would be exposed as a fraud and lose his benefits and his job. And Mark? Mark was about to learn that his trusting little wife was much smarter than he thought. December arrived, and I knew exactly what was coming. Mark and his friends thought they were so clever with their Christmas dinner plan, but I had been preparing my own surprise for months. They wanted a show? Well, they were about to get one they'd never forget. The first week of December, I overheard Mark on the phone with Jake while I was folding laundry upstairs. He thought I couldn't hear him, but our house had thin walls. "Christmas dinner is perfect," Mark was saying. "My mom will be there, Sarah's sister, everyone. Maximum humiliation factor." "You sure you can go through with it?" Jake asked. I could hear his voice through the phone speaker. "Are you kidding? After everything we've planned? I can't wait to see her face when I drop those papers on the table." "Tommy's bringing his camera," Jake laughed. "We're going to record the whole thing. Sarah's breakdown is going to be legendary." My hands clenched the towel I was holding. They wanted to record my humiliation and probably share it with everyone they knew. These men were even more disgusting than I thought. That night, I called my sister Emma and asked her to come to Christmas dinner. "Of course I'll be there," Emma said. "But you sound weird. Is everything okay?" "Just promise me you'll come, no matter what happens," I said. "And Emma, bring your phone and keep it recording during dinner." "Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I can't explain right now, but I need you to trust me." "Can you do that?" Emma agreed, though I could hear the worry in her voice. She was the only person in my family who had never liked Mark, and she was going to be my witness for what was about to happen. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while knowing my husband was planning to destroy me in front of our families. Mark was actually being nicer to me, probably feeling guilty about what he was planning to do. "You're working so hard on Christmas dinner," he said one evening, watching me make a shopping list. "I really appreciate everything you do." "It's going to be a Christmas dinner no one will ever forget," I replied, and I meant every word. I spent hours preparing the special gifts for Jake, Tommy, and Dave. Each folder was perfectly organized with copies of all the evidence Carol had gathered. For Jake, I included bank statements showing his embezzlement, copies of forged expense reports, and photos of him using company credit cards for personal purchases. I even had security camera footage from his office building showing him working late, the same nights money went missing from client accounts. Tommy's folder was thicker. Photos of him with Rebecca at the motel, credit card receipts from their secret dates, and evidence of the cars he'd been stealing from the dealership. I also included screenshots of text messages between him and Rebecca where they laughed about fooling his wife. Dave's folder contained military records proving he never served overseas, copies of his fake deployment papers, and documentation of all the benefits he'd been illegally collecting. I had even found his real military file showing he was discharged early for disciplinary problems. But the best part was what I had prepared for Mark. Hidden in my jewelry box was a flash drive containing every recording I'd made of his phone calls, screenshots of all his text messages, and financial records showing every penny he'd tried to hide from me. I had also prepared a few other surprises. I had already filed my own divorce papers, dated 3 days before Mark planned to serve his. I had frozen our joint accounts to prevent him from moving any more money. And I had sent anonymous tips to Jake's company, Tommy's dealership, and the VA about Dave's fraud. The morning of Christmas dinner, Mark was nervous. He kept checking his phone and pacing around the house. "You okay, honey?" I asked, putting the finishing touches on the turkey. "Yeah, just thinking about work stuff," he lied. "Well, try to relax. It's Christmas, a day for family and surprises." Mark had no idea how right I was. An hour before dinner, Jake, Tommy, and Dave arrived together. They were all dressed up and acting excited, like they were going to a party instead of someone's destruction. "Sarah, you look beautiful," Jake said with his fake smile. "This is going to be such a special Christmas." "Oh, it definitely will be," I replied, thinking about the wrapped gifts hidden under my chair. As everyone sat down for dinner, I could feel the tension in the air. Mark kept glancing at his friends, and they kept glancing back. Emma noticed something was wrong and kept looking at me with worried eyes. The turkey was carved, the wine was poured, and everyone was laughing and talking. But I knew that in just a few minutes, everything was going to change forever. The moment Mark threw those divorce papers on the table, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. After months of planning and preparing, it was finally time to show these men what happens when you underestimate someone. Jake was the first to open his gift, his fingers fumbling with the red ribbon. I watched his face carefully as he lifted the lid of the box and saw the thick folder inside. His cocky smile disappeared instantly. "What is this?" he muttered, pulling out the first document. It was a bank statement from his company showing the missing $50,000, with his name highlighted in bright yellow. Jake's face went from confused to pale to absolutely terrified in about 3 seconds. "Keep reading," I said sweetly, taking a sip of my wine. "There's so much more." Jake's hands were shaking as he flipped through page after page of evidence. Forged expense reports with his signature, security camera photos of him in the office at midnight when money disappeared, credit card statements showing company funds used for his personal vacations. "Sarah, what is this?" Jake's voice cracked like a teenager's. "It's your Christmas present," I replied. "Everything your company needs to send you to prison for embezzlement." Tommy had been watching Jake with growing panic, but now he started tearing into his own gift. The first thing he saw was a photo of himself kissing Rebecca in the motel parking lot. "Oh, God," Tommy whispered, his face turning green. "There are 47 photos in total," I said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. "Plus videos, text messages, and hotel receipts. Your wife Sarah is going to be so interested to see what you and her sister have been doing every Thursday afternoon." Tommy's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the photos. There he was, clear as day, betraying his wife with her own sister. The timestamps on the photos showed this had been going on for 8 months. "But wait, there's more," I continued. "Keep looking." Tommy found the evidence of his car theft scheme. Photos of him driving dealership cars with fake tags, security footage from the motel showing him in different stolen cars, and records proving he'd been doing this for over a year. "You've been busy, Tommy," I said. "Cheating on your wife, stealing cars, lying to everyone. Your boss is going to love seeing all of this." Dave was the last to open his gift, and by now his hands were trembling. He knew whatever was in that box was going to destroy his life too. The first document he saw was his real military record, the one showing he was discharged early for disciplinary problems and never served overseas. "No," Dave whispered. "No, no, no." "Yes," I said firmly. "Every fake document you created, every lie you told, every dollar you stole from veterans who actually served, it's all in there." Dave's folder contained copies of his forged deployment papers, his fake medical records, and documentation of every benefit payment he'd received illegally. I had even included a letter from a real veteran who had been denied benefits while Dave collected money for service he never performed. "The VA investigators are very interested in your case," I told him. "Fraud against veterans is a federal crime, Dave. You're looking at serious prison time." All 3 men sat in stunned silence, staring at the evidence of their crimes. Mark was looking back and forth between his friends, finally realizing that his wife wasn't the helpless victim he thought she was. "How did you get all this?" Mark demanded. "The same way you got information about hiding our money," I replied calmly. "I hired professionals. The difference is, my professionals are actually good at their jobs." Linda, Mark's mother, was staring at everyone in shock. "I don't understand what's happening." "Let me explain," I said, standing up from my chair. "Your son and his friends have been planning to humiliate me at Christmas dinner for months. They wanted to watch me cry and break down when Mark served me divorce papers. They even planned to record it for their entertainment." Emma was recording everything on her phone just like I had asked her to. "But here's what they didn't know," I continued. "I've been watching them too, and what I found was that all 3 of Mark's best friends are criminals." Jake was holding his head in his hands. Tommy was staring at the photos of his affair like he couldn't believe they existed. Dave was reading through his military fraud evidence with tears in his eyes. "I've already sent copies of everything to the police, the FBI, your employers, and your wives," I announced. "By tomorrow morning, All of your lives are going to be very different. The room was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. This is it, the moment I had been planning for months. Mark still thought he was in control, but he was about to learn that his trusting little wife had been 10 steps ahead of him the entire time. Mark slammed his fist on the table, making the wine glasses shake. Sarah, what the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just destroy people's lives like this. I looked at him with complete calm. Destroy people's lives? Mark, that's exactly what you and your friends have been planning to do to me. The only difference is I have actual evidence of real crimes. This is insane, Mark shouted. You're acting crazy. Am I? I reached into my purse and pulled out a small recording device. Let me play something for everyone. I pressed play, and Mark's voice filled the room. Sarah's so stupid, she has no idea what's coming. Jessica thinks it's hilarious that my wife still makes me dinner every night while I'm screwing around. Mark's face went white. Linda gasped and covered her mouth. Emma kept recording everything. That's from last Tuesday, I said. But I have months of recordings. Would you like to hear the one where you and Jake plan to hide our money in offshore accounts? Or maybe the one where Tommy gives you advice on how to stick me with credit card debt? You recorded me? Mark's voice was barely a whisper. Every phone call, every conversation with your friends, every disgusting comment about me. I have it all. I pulled out a flash drive, including the calls with your lawyer about forcing me to sell our house. Jake suddenly looked up from his folder. Mark, she knows about the money. She knows everything. Speaking of money, I said, I should probably mention that I froze all our joint accounts 3 days ago. That $15,000 you moved to the Cayman Islands, I had it transferred back and reported the account to the IRS. Mark's mouth fell open. You can't do that. Actually, I can, especially since I filed for divorce first. I pulled out another set of papers. These are my divorce papers, filed last Monday. Your papers are worthless, Mark. I beat you to it. The room erupted in chaos. Mark was yelling, his mother was crying, and his 3 friends were staring at their destroyed lives in their hands. There's more, I said loudly, getting everyone's attention. Mark, remember Jessica? Your affair partner who thinks I'm so stupid? Mark nodded weakly. Well, Jessica Martinez isn't a marketing coordinator. She's a private investigator I hired. Every hotel room, every dinner, every time you bragged about fooling me, she was recording it all for evidence. Mark's face went from white to green. That's impossible. Is it? Jessica's real name is Carol, and she's very good at her job. You've been sleeping with my private investigator for 3 months, telling her all your secrets and paying for hotel rooms with credit cards that I can trace. Emma started laughing despite herself. Even Linda looked shocked at how stupid her son had been. The house is in my name only, by the way, I continued. I had the deed changed last year when you were too busy cheating to pay attention to what you were signing. You need to pack your things and leave tonight. Sarah, please, Mark begged. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Fix this? I looked around the table at the 3 men who had planned my humiliation. Jake's going to prison for embezzlement. Tommy's wife is getting divorce papers tomorrow, along with photos of his affair with her sister. Dave's going to lose his job and his benefits and probably go to jail for fraud. And you, Mark, are going to be divorced, broke, and homeless by New Year's. I stood up and smoothed my dress. You wanted to bet on whether I would cry tonight. Well, here's the thing about your bet. You were wrong. I'm not crying, but you are. And it was true. Jake was crying as he stared at evidence that would send him to prison. Tommy was crying as he looked at photos that would destroy his marriage. Dave was crying as he read about his military fraud being exposed. Mark was crying too, finally understanding that his perfect plan had backfired completely. Merry Christmas, everyone, I said, raising my wine glass. Emma, would you like to stay for dessert? I made Mark's favorite chocolate cake, but I don't think he'll be here to enjoy it. As the 3 men gathered their evidence folders and stumbled toward the door, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Tommy's wife. Thank you for the photos. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Rebecca is no longer welcome in our family. I smiled and showed the message to Emma, who grinned back at me. Sarah, Emma said, I have never been more proud to be your sister." Mark and his friends left that night with their tails between their legs, their lives in ruins, and their friendship destroyed by their own greed and cruelty. I spent the rest of Christmas evening with Emma, eating chocolate cake and planning my new life as a free woman. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting smart. And that's how I turned the tables on the men who thought they could destroy me. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous, and sometimes the best gift you can give someone is exactly what they deserve.